Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. My amendment is fairly simple. It directs the National Science Foundation to prohibit grantees from participating in malign foreign talent programs from countries of concern while they are receiving an NSF grant. These countries, as identified by the State Department, are currently China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. I want to thank Congressman Waltz for joining me in introducing this amendment. For years, Congress, federal research agencies, the national security agencies, and universities have been working to root out malign foreign talent recruitment. The time has come to simply prohibit them from receiving U.S. taxpayer dollars. The Chinese government knows that economic strength and scientific innovation are keys to global influence and military power. So the Chinese Communist Party aims to acquire our early stage research and expertise to erode our competitive advantage. As part of this effort, China has been making extensive use of non-traditional collectors. These individuals are not spies in the traditional sense, but they are nonetheless collecting information sought by the Chinese government. Until recently, many U.S. researchers participating in these programs may have been naive or unwitting participants in this espionage, but they are can no longer claim ignorance. My amendment defines malign foreign talent programs as any program or activity that includes compensation, including cash, research funding, honorific titles, promised future compensation, or other types of remuneration provided by a foreign state or an entity sponsored by the foreign state to the targeted individual in exchange for the individual transferring knowledge or expertise to the foreign country. The key word here is in exchange. We know from foreign talent contracts that have been uncovered by the FBI and agency investigations that Chinese talent programs have extensive requirements for transfer of information to China, usually in the conflict with the requirements of U.S. research grants and university employment contracts. Let me be clear, legitimate talent programs do not require the unethical or sometimes illegal transfer of knowledge or research to sponsor. My amendment also makes clear that we are not trying to prohibit the legitimate exchange of scientific ideas and collaboration. It explicitly states that the prohibition should not prevent participation in international conferences, scholarly presentations of open research. This amendment was informed by feedback from university associations and several scientific societies. University and scientists want clear rules for the road, and this will help them provide that type of guidance. I consider this amendment as a first step. The rules should be the same for all federal research agencies, so I hope I can work together with the co-sponsor of my amendment, Congressman Waltz, as well as Chairman Johnson and Ranking Member Lucas, to make this government-wide prohibition through the legislation process. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I recognize myself to speak on this amendment. And I want to thank you and the Republican Committee staff for working closely with the Democratic members and staff on this amendment. This committee, on a bipartisan basis, has continued to advance constructive policies to address research security risk. We all understand that the risks are real. We also understand that the need for science to remain open and collaborative. And we have a deep appreciation for the contributions that foreign scholars have and will continue to make to U.S. science and innovation. We must keep our doors open to global talent if we are to remain competitive. I believe this amendment was carefully developed to balance those risks and benefits. So I support this amendment and yield back. Any further comments?
Mr. Lucas.
If no, then the vote occurs.
Mr. Lucas wants to be recognized.
Oh, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this amendment, and I want to thank Congressman Feenstra and Ranking Member Waltz for their work on this issue. For the last 4 years, on a bipartisan basis, the Science Committee has been working to address foreign theft taxpayer research, particularly by the Chinese Communist Party. I know that research theft and malign foreign influence are explicit strategies within the CCP's plan to become the global leader in science and innovation. Our committee has carefully worked with federal research and national security agencies, as well as universities and other stakeholders, to determine the appropriate steps the federal government should take to stop this malign activity. We've worked to find solutions that address actual problems identified by agencies and universities without harming the open research system in the U.S. that has attracted the best scientists in the world. This amendment ensures that legitimate international cooperation and exchange of scientific ideas is not prohibited by this new policy. This amendment is the appropriate next step we must take to stop the CCP and others from using malign foreign talent programs to steal knowledge and expertise. I appreciate the university community working with us to refine the language of the amendment and for recognizing the time has come to simply prohibit these malign foreign talent programs. I look forward to working with my colleagues through the process to make this a requirement across all federal research agencies. And I urge my colleagues to support the amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Walsh, I think, is requested time.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. I am proud to co-sponsor this amendment with my colleague, Congressman Finstra. In my opinion, this prohibition on U.S. taxpayer-funded research participating in malign foreign talent programs is many years overdue, but I am glad universities are now on board. 2 years ago, I sponsored the Securing American Science and Technology Act, which became law as part of the FY19 NDAA. This was the first step Congress took to secure federal research from foreign theft. Last year, I sponsored the provision that took the next step to require researchers across all federal research agencies to disclose their foreign sources of funding. In the underlying NSF for the Future Act, we give NSF further tools to deal with foreign theft of foundation-funded research, including requiring annual training for NSF-funded researcher. This amendment takes the next step and in many ways simplifies many of the rules and processes we put into place by simply prohibiting malign foreign talent programs. We know that most of these talent program contracts already violate federal grant terms and conditions, but now there will be no question left in the mind of a faculty member of a university of whether or not participation is allowed. Now, while this amendment is only a requirement for NSF, which is germane for this market, my intention is that this should serve as a placeholder for government-wide requirement. I will work with Mr. Finstra, with you, Chairwoman Johnson, Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Lucas, as we move forward on the next NDAA to make this a requirement for every federal research agency. We make the investments in science and technology that NSF for the Future proposes, but we also need to make sure the research isn't transferred right out the back door to Beijing. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Hearing none, then the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. The amendment is adopted.